We were made to be courageous. We were made to lead the way. We could be the generation that finally breaks the chains. We were made to be courageous. We were made to be courageous.
Hey, and we're back this afternoon, and I want to tell you one of my favorite congresspersons who has really been an outperformer in terms of his commitment to conservative principles is one from right here, of course, in our listening area. No stranger to Faith Talk 579 WTBN. Of course, I'm talking about Congressman Dennis Ross, who represents Florida's 15th Congressional District. And, of course, the congressman goes way back to a lot of good days of work in the Florida legislature. And, of course, his family is certainly well known, not only in Polk and Hillsborough, but in the areas that he represents. And he has truly been one of those congresspersons who, well, sticks to their guns. And when he tells you what he's thinking, that's the way he votes as well. With that, Dennis Ross, good to have you with us this afternoon.
Yeah, God bless you, Bill. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I don't want to let you down now.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Well, you know, you had a TV personality a few months ago,
Yep.
decided that maybe your district wanted to change, and
Right.
I don't think that he made much of an impression.
No, but it was good for everybody. It gave us an opportunity to have a very positive campaign, to get our message out. And quite frankly, you know, every 2 years we should be able to justify our existence as a representative, and I understand that. That's the process, and I'm okay with it.
Well, let's dive into just some general issues today, and of course, everything is usually pretty fluid, but some things that I think that give you a chance just to address our listeners this afternoon, and let us get an idea about how you're processing through some of these important issues. You know, in the last few weeks, of course, at the first of the month, Senator Rand Paul over on the Senate side put a bump in the road, if you will, or just absolutely asked the question about all of this Patriot Act that, of course, was implemented after we were attacked on 9/11. Part of that includes this metadata, which is the government actually, capturing at least the names of who's emailing who's calling who.
Right.
And then the idea of whether, at what time do you get a wiretap subpoena by a judge. Where do you come down on all of this particular divide between, our personal security, but the idea that we have to keep ourselves, private?
Well, I firmly believe that there has been an overreach by the federal government with regard to their interpretation of the Patriot Act. And when this all hit, I did some research, and come to find out that if the FBI or their appointee wants to obtain any type of information, the production of documents, they have to go to a foreign intelligence surveillance court, and it's a one-sided deal. They go in and say, okay, I believe that I need all the phone data from Verizon across the country because it's relevant to an ongoing a terrorist investigation. There's nobody on the other side to say no. So the court issues it, and then suddenly you have all this metadata. Now, I did an investigation of this, and I actually went to the House Intelligence Committee, and I said, I want to see the application for this. They said, we won't let you see it. I said, well, then you got to walk me through this process. And what the process is it's just an overreach by the federal government to get all this data. Now, I know they're doing it under the guise of keeping us safe, and believe me, we have to do everything we can to keep us safe. But why is my 75-year-old mother-in-law's phone records relevant to an ongoing terrorist investigation? It's not. The problem has been, according to the FBI and the NSA, is that they can't control all this data because it is destroyed in some instances, in 6 months by Verizon. AOL may do it in a year, or somebody else in a month. So they're trying to say and make the case that all this data is relevant to whatever ongoing terrorist investigation may be out there. Now, we won't mine it unless we have a reasonable cause to do so, but we just need to store it somewhere. Well, if that's the problem, let's change the law. Let's require that they maintain this metadata, meaning Verizon or whoever the carrier may be, for a 2-year period of time. And then if we believe that there is reasonable suspicion or anything that is truly relevant to an ongoing terrorist investigation, we can go in and mine that. So we've come back, and the Freedom Act and the Patriot Act that we've recently passed out of the House did that. And it made it harder for them to just grab all this data and hold it out there. And it also put some restrictions in there that they just can't go and now listen to your phone call that has nothing to do with a terrorist act, but may have something to do with a child custody case or something. So we've got to balance this. It's very difficult. And I believe we're moving in the right direction. I believe it's better than it was 3 years ago. And I believe it will continue to get better, but we have to stay vigilant to make sure that we do not give up our liberties for the sake of security.
Congressman Ross, I think I heard an interview with former CIA head Woolsey, and he was asked the question, okay, we've been gathering all this data, but just what particular situations has this data helped us to thwart an actual attack? Of course, we know that the FBI was looking at the two brothers up in Boston, but yet they carried out their act. And his answer was pretty curious because he said, well, I don't want to address that directly, but I can tell you that after an attack happens, it's important for us to use this metadata to see who the perpetrators were talking to after the fact and see if they were aided. Well, hey, that's part of it. I get that. But it seemed like he was really taking a dodge to the question of all of what we're doing. Is this really a worthwhile endeavor with what we're going to do to prevent an attack?
And that's a very good position, a point that you make there. I mean, prevention is everything. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the collection of the data, is to prevent the attack or the incident from ever occurring. Now, granted, they can reconstruct and look at and try to find accomplices and other people who may be liable here after the fact by mining this data and following the trails there. But prevention is the key. It's the sole purpose we have this in place. We've got to be able to have strong commerce. We've got to be able to have people feeling free that they can go fishing and enjoy their lives to which they have been accustomed as a country for 240 years. If we can't prevent it, then what are we doing just looking at the post-mortem? And I think that's where we've got to be very careful and make sure that what we're doing leads to prevention. And that has to be our focus. We've got to be vigilant about that. You know, we've got to have people that, as the regular mom and dad out on the street have got to say something if they see something. And this is a national movement we've got to do, and we can't rest it all on NSA, because if we do, we will give up our liberties.
Well, let's move on to another topic that I think is very important to Floridians. And, of course, we're talking this afternoon with Congressman Dennis Ross, who represents the 15th District here in Florida, primarily Polk County, but also portions of Hillsborough. And we are just honored to have him with us today. Well, as you know, in the last week or so, the president, after the 45-day review by Congress, has decided to take Cuba off the list of countries who are sponsors of terrorism. And I want to ask you, Congressman, you know, there was a fair amount of people on the right who criticized the president for doing this. But I think that both the House and the Senate had 45 days to protest this or to challenge the president. That didn't come forward.
No.
Could you speak to that, and then what your own personal policy is in terms of how we should, I know how we're going to go forward with Cuba, but your thoughts about how we're doing this, since we didn't get anything in return when we gave Fidel and Raul this great gift?
This is indicative of a failed foreign policy across this world by this country. Look, we got nothing out of our negotiations, not even negotiations. We got nothing out of our unilateral action with Cuba. The least we could do is hold out. The least we could say is, you give us free elections and you release all your political prisoners, and we'll grant you the status of not being a favoring terrorism nation. We got nothing out of this. We continue to get nothing out of it. Remember, Cuba needs us more than we need them. Those people who have suffered terribly for the last 55 years at the hands of the Castro brothers have no idea and no opportunity to excel, to be productive, and to gain that sense of self-worth. They need us worse than we need them, and we could be there to be their economic partner in so many ways as it was before the 1950 revolution. Unfortunately, we got nothing. We got nothing but grandstanding and sending movie stars over there saying, hey, isn't this great? And by the way, now, you know, that the Pope's been there. Well, Raul may start going back to church. Come on. Let us look at this for what it is. It is a human rights violation that has existed for over 55 years. We need to lead from a position of strength. We have not done it in Cuba. We've not done it in the Middle East. We've not done it in the Ukraine. We've not done it anywhere else in this country. And we've become, as a result of this continued pattern of failed foreign policy, we've become a laughingstock throughout the world.
And, of course, I know last week the president was taking credit that and they're still trying to figure out, I think, what poll it was from, that since he took office, that America's standing in the world has gotten so much more respect. But we'll just leave that there. Notwithstanding the fact that I agree with you, Congressman, that we got nothing or foreign, it's just another foreign policy blunder. But notwithstanding the fact that Florida is now positioned right off the coast, the fact that probably tourism, maybe even cruise ships, so many things are going to be part of this economic revolution that America's businesses are going to be involved in. It is going to be a pretty good economic boom for Florida as well, correct?
Always would be, Bill. It was back in the heyday of Havana. It was great for Tampa, which was a port of call for both Havana and Havana for Tampa. The problem is that we got nothing out of it. I mean, we could be the Tampa Chamber could be leading, an economic diplomacy mission down there with opportunities, but it would happen anyway. I mean, because of our proximity to Cuba, the economic opportunities are going to happen anyway. The mortality of both Raul and Fidel are going to come to an end, and this is going to open up regardless. It's just that we couldn't have picked a worse way to do it. And it's kind of like this recession that we went through. This is the worst recovery of any modern-day recession we've ever seen because of government's involvement and the restriction on private enterprise and good commerce. We could have made this opportunity with Cuba so much better and inure to the benefit of the Tampa Bay region and to the whole state of Florida. Instead, we'll just see what happens. Maybe we'll have China as a partner. Maybe we'll run the ships as they, do the oil drilling out off the coast of Cuba. Who knows? But we've got no control over this relationship now, is my point. And yes, it's a wonderful opportunity economically, always would have been, and eventually will be. But to the degree it could be better than it is, I think we've hurt our chances.
And, of course, that's the voice of Dennis Ross. He's our congressman from right here in Florida's 15th Congressional District, talking about some important topics of the day. Well, Congressman, I want to talk a little bit more about Florida in a moment, but something that really is close to your heart and my heart, and that is the issue of pro-life.
Yes.
The United States House, at least for their part, I know they say Mitch McConnell in the Senate says they're going to get a vote on this, but you passed the 20-week abortion pain bill. Tell us what that bill is all about and why you're proud that we were able to get that through.
Well, first of all, it would prohibit any abortions from being performed for 20 or more weeks after fertilization. And there are some certain exceptions there. Where there's a reasonable medical judgment to save the life of the pregnant mother. There is if the pregnancy is a result of rape against an adult woman, and there's another exception if the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest against a minor. And we know that a fetus at 20 weeks is capable of feeling pain.
That's right.
And to do this is no short of murder. And, we live in a country where we believe that you have innocence until proven guilty. Why can't we use that same standard and say you have life until you prove otherwise? I mean, there should be a strong movement, as there is, but even stronger acceptance that there's a presumption of life over non-life when you're dealing with a human being. You can go to jail for disturbing alligator eggs, but you can't go to jail for disturbing a human fetus. I mean, it's to me, we're warped. We've got to come together on this, and so I was proud to see this law get passed. Obviously, it's going to be controversial. I mean, there's no question. This has been controversial since time immemorial, but we have to take a stand. I mean, I'm a firm believer in giving a presumption of life over non-life, and I will continue to be that way. I'll be vigilant that way, and anything we can do to preserve the sanctity of human life, I will be an advocate.
And, of course, that's Dennis Ross this afternoon, who represents Florida's 15th Congressional District. And what's interesting is that, we have the left that is just all over themselves, whether it's the snail darter in California or the global warming. Science is so important. And what's interesting here is it's the very same field of science that is now able to tell us about when these little babies not only have pain, we know the heartbeat starts not too long after conception, and it sure is interesting to see the hypocrisy of the left when, in some instances, they go very extreme on what is relatively shaky science, but yet when the science is really coming in on this, they ignore it.
Absolutely.
Let's bring things back to Florida, and I want to do this by way of a discussion on infrastructure. Once again, we had a national incident where the national media decided to shoot first and decide what was the cause of the problem after the fact, and this time it was with the derailment of that train, a train in which was going too fast around a corner, and now at least we're becoming more plugged into the fact that it wasn't a mechanical error. We're going to be dealing more on the human side, but as soon as this happened, Congressman, there was all sorts of talk about why Amtrak had not given the blue chip revenue they wanted to redo the lines. But a couple questions for you. Number one, should we be? It's one thing to subsidize Amtrak, between Washington D.C. and New York because they got a lot of ridership. There's a lot of other areas where people don't ride the trains a whole lot. Should we be subsidizing everything? And on the big question of infrastructure, I want to engage you on some of our plumbing and sewer lines that are in some of our cities to ask you whether those cities and counties should be setting money aside now, or is it up to the federal government to bail them out later?
Good questions, both of them. First of all, Bill, let me just tell you this. The business of business should not be left up to government. Government should not be in the sole passenger rail business out there, because government can't do anything efficiently, effectively, or on time. We know that. But if passenger travel was strictly a function of the federal government, we'd have the U.S. Air Force probably taking us from airport to airport because we wouldn't have private airlines. What we need to do is develop public-private partnerships. Like we could have had the right-of-way owned by the state and let the private sector lease the right-of-way to put trains out there. You have better efficiencies, you have better safety record, and you have much more effective rail. We need to make rail public-private partnerships so that there's some skin in the game from the private sector who can do things so much better than the federal government. And it's not a question of continuing to throw more and more money out of it. Amtrak is another fine example of a failed business experiment by the federal government. When it comes to infrastructure, Bill, we had the opportunity in the stimulus package passed under this administration in order to bail out through a major investment in roads, bridges, electric grids, but instead they used the stimulus package to pay crony payoffs. We never put any of it into that, and now we went $10 trillion more in debt since then. What we need to do is incentivize the investment of private dollars. We've got to do this by way of increasing the number of tax-free municipal bonds. Cities and counties need to be able to make this investment on their own, and we need to give them the tools to do that. I don't want to see them go out there and raise property taxes in order to redo a sewer system or to put in new electric systems or to put in new water systems. They need to be able to have some incentives where they can bond this work over a 30-year period of time and not have to have these bonds be taxed so that people will invest in them and use private capital to come in there and maintain the infrastructure and rebuild the infrastructure instead of everybody looking to the government and saying, give me, give me, give me. You know, at our rate of inflation, which is going to start ticking up here. Right now it's down to next to nothing still, but soon Janet Yellen's going to be having to raise the rates on money. Right. And as a result, our debt is going to increase even greater. Our debt service is going to increase even greater. And then you're going to have even more limited resources in the federal government to pay for such programs as health care or such programs as transportation or criminal justice or things of that nature. We can't continue to depend on the government to bail us out of everything, because the government doesn't produce anything. It just kind of takes from you to give to others. We've got to incentivize private capital. There's a lot of capital out there. There's a lot of businesses. There's a lot of that want to invest. And if you give them the right incentives, they'll invest. Cities and counties want to be able to maintain it themselves without having to have strings attached from the federal government. We need a comprehensive tax-free municipal bond program that allows for this investment to happen, and we can save our infrastructure, because it's at the point where it's not good.
Got about a minute left, Congressman. I always like to ask you, what is your number one or two pieces of personal legislation that you've been working diligently on?
Okay, in 1 minute, we got a couple here. One,
I'll take 2 minutes. I'll take 2 minutes.
Well, we do have a private flood insurance bill that is gaining a lot of bipartisan support. It allows for states to authorize and certify private insurance companies to sell private flood. In their state, consumers can take it. They don't have to. They can leave the National Flood Insurance Program, and if they don't like private, they can come back without ever being harmed or damaged. It allows for those that have mortgages that are backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac to accept this type of. It gives consumers more choice. There's no downside to it. It puts private capital back into the market. It'll also lower rates, and I think do better risk management for prevention and mitigation of floods. Another one which I'm working on is a disaster savings account bill that, again, incentivizes people up to $5,000 a year by putting money into a disaster savings account that, especially in Florida, now that we're in hurricane season, you can put storm shutters on, all without having to pay taxes on the money that you use to do this, because what we want to do is to incentivize personal responsibility. What we know is that for every $1 you put in mitigation, you save $3 from relief, which means that that's $3 FEMA won't be paying because you put $1 into prevention. These are some small things that I'm working on. Quite frankly, I would love to see us have an answer to health care, and I don't think we'll ever have a repeal or a replacement until such time as this president's out of office. But in the meantime, we need to do everything we can to make health care more available, affordable, and to get the government out of the way so that the doctor can do what he does best, and that's treat his patients, and the patients can then have the chance to afford that exceptional health care. So it's going to be an exciting another 18 months here. Bill, I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you over this, and thank you for this opportunity.
Quick follow-up in the area of hurricanes. Are you a little concerned that the Floridians have a little amnesia in terms of hurricane preparation because we've dodged them for so long?
We dodged them for 11 years. I was in the legislature in 04 and 05 when we got hit, and we had 3 successive storms come right through the center of Florida in 04, and it taught us a lesson, and it taught us a lot of lessons, and I think we've put a blind eye to it right now, and why they say it's going to be a quiescent season, at some point in time we're going to get hit again. It's just the history of Florida.
All right. Congressman Dennis Ross from the 15th District, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Bill. Have a great day.
God bless you, my friend. Coming